It's
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Big thank you to Stephen for asking me to speak. Always very lovely to have a chance to speak. It's always very lovely for me. Hope it's lovely for you too. But it's always lovely for me to have a chance to speak at Breakfast and Learn. And I wanted to start this week by, well, hopefully it was going to be a little bit discursive over the course of the morning. So hopefully we won't catch people mid-bite of their breakfast. That's all right. Okay. That's all right. That's all right. So I want to start by asking people a question, which is really sort of more of a riddle, but we'll go with the question. And the question is this: what is the connection between Breakfast and Learn and Shabbat? And specifically, thinking about Friday night, the time that Shabbat comes in, what is the connection between Breakfast and Learn, today, and Shabbat? Anyone have any thoughts on that? We're going to answer it at the end of the shift. If anyone has any preliminary thoughts, then that could save us all a lot of time, really. So, no, okay, well,
only this morning.
Okay, that's a good connection. That isn't the one we're going to talk about today, but that is a very good connection. We are, however, going to talk about Shabbat. We're going to talk about the time that Shabbat comes in. We're going to talk about all of these things. And it's very topical at the moment because we find ourselves in the middle of a week between last week's Parasha B'Shalach, wherein at the end of the Parsha, we were introduced as a nation for the first time to the beginnings of the laws of Shabbat. And we had the whole incident regarding the man, and we were told collect double on the sixth day, and on Shabbat you shouldn't go out. And of course, there's the famous Midrash with Datan and Aviram, that they went and spread the man all over the place and the birds ate it. Does anyone have the custom to feed birds on Erev Shabbat B'Shalach, Shabbat Shira? Okay, some people have that custom. So that was last week's Parsha. And in this week's Parsha, the one we're coming up to read, which without bias, as Stephen said, I think it's the best Parsha in the world because it's my Bar Mitzvah Sedra. So this week's Parsha, we have, of course, Zacharat Yom Shabbat L'Gashor. In the Ten Commandments, we have the commandment to remember the Shabbat. So we find ourselves in the middle of this week in which Shabbat should be at the core of our attention and the core of our mind. And so that's why I wanted to speak about it today and speak a little bit about Shabbat. So I want to start by asking you another question, which should be an easy question, a simple question. When does Shabbat come in? When does Shabbat come in? And just to clarify that question, I'm not asking for a Stephen-esque announcement on a Friday that Shabbat comes in at 4:48 and Shul will be at 4:50. I'm asking, when does Shabbat come in? What do we think? Okay. Okay, so Shabbat comes in from sunset, which we're going to call Shkia. Okay, that's what we'll go with that one. Not going to look too far into the discrepancy between those two, between the sunset and nightfall. Shabbat comes in at this time called Shkia, okay, which is sunset, as Stephen said. The question is, when exactly is that, right? When exactly is Shkia? I'm going to use that word as opposed to sunset because otherwise we're going to get ourselves confused. So when exactly is Shkia? Is it when the sun starts to set and starts to go down? Is it sort of when the sun's more than halfway below the sort of sea level? Halfway below? Is it when the sun's completely under sea level? Or is it at a later point? When is that? Anyone have any thoughts on that? It's a big discussion, a big machloket, a big dispute amongst the Rishonim, but generally there are sort of two major opinions that I want to focus on today. There's sort of the most straightforward and simple opinion, which is that Shkia, sunset, is what you would think that as soon as the sun kind of goes completely under the sea level, as soon as it's completely out of our eyesight, out of our eye line, that would be sunset, that would be Shkia, that would be this time that we're talking about. That's the sort of simple opinion. And to explain how that works, just going along with what Stephen said as well, we then have a period called Bein Hashmashot, which is this period of doubt as to which day it is. That's a period between the sunset and nightfall, which usually is roughly around an hour, That is going to be this period between sunset, when the sun originally sets, and nightfall. There is, however, another opinion. Okay. So there is another opinion which we're going to talk about, which we just brought up, which is brought by Rabbeinu Tam. Before we get into that, has anyone heard of anyone sort of saying, "I keep Rabbeinu Tam time"? Has anyone heard of that concept on Shabbat? They keep Shabbat up to Rabbeinu Tam. Has anyone heard that as a concept? Yeah, you've heard that. Okay, we're going to talk a bit about that as a concept. This is where the idea of Rabbeinu Tam starts from. This idea of Rabbeinu Tam time starts from. Many people know Rabbeinu Tam was one of the most famous, probably the most famous of the Balei Tosfot. He was also the grandson of Rashi, and they had many disputes. And Rabbeinu Tam has lots of sort of different opinions that sort of differ from the majority, including, for example, tefillin. He has a completely different view on tefillin than his grandfather Rashi. And some people go by his view, some people go by both. We tend to go by the sort of Rashi view. But when it comes to time, there's a Tosfot in Menachot on Kav Amud Bet, in which, and it's a very, very long Tosfot, which I will send to you if you'd like to read the full thing after, but for now I'll just give the sort of summary. And what Rabbeinu Tam says is that Shkia is not, as we just described it, sort of a singular point in time. It's not a singular sort of minute, moment where the sun sets. It's actually quite a long process. It starts from that moment where the sun goes beneath the horizon, goes beneath this sort of skyline, and we can no longer see it. And it actually lasts around 58 and a half minutes until, I won't go into all of the sort of Amoraic cosmology that the Amoraim of the Rabbanim of the time of the Gemara, the reasons that they kind of is relevant, but it lasts approximately 58 and a half minutes. And then there is the sort of end of Shkia. There is no more, there's no, the sun, there is no sort of, there's nothing left of the sun at all. We cannot see any rays. We cannot see anything at all. That is the kind of final Shkia. And that's how Rabbeinu Tam sees it. So he sees the kind of point of Shkia in terms of when Shabbat comes in as 58 and a half minutes later than how we would see it. He would see it coming in 58 and a half minutes later. And then just to kind of finish the comparison, for Rabbeinu Tam, Bein Hashmashot, this period of doubt in between sunset and nightfall, is 13 and a half minutes, which means that 72 minutes, just to complete, hope everyone's still with me with all these times I'm throwing at you, 72 minutes after our Shkia, when the sun sets, the original understanding of Shkia, that would be nightfall according to Rabbeinu Tam. That's why I asked earlier, so before, he had heard of people, when people say on Shabbat, on Motzei Shabbat, on a Saturday, that Shabbat doesn't go out for them until Rabbeinu Tam time, that means 72 minutes after Shkia, which tends to be throughout the year a lot later than it would go out for us. There is a couple of weeks in the summer where it's quite close. Even we might be a bit later, but in general, that's a lot longer, a lot more of a long time to be keeping Shabbat. So these are the two different opinions. We have our original understanding, Bein Hashmashot, sunset, as we would understand it, followed by sort of roughly an hour or so of Bein Hashmashot, and then nightfall, and Shabbat comes in when the sun sets. And then we have this Rabbeinu Tam understanding, which is this sort of bizarre idea that even after the sun's gone down, 58 and a half minutes later, would still be Friday, not Shabbat. And then Shabbat comes in then. So this is the kind of idea we have. And what's interesting is the Mechaber, Rav Yosef Cairo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, seemed to agree with Rabbeinu Tam, which is bizarre because normally if Rav Yosef Cairo, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, sort of agrees with a certain opinion, that's what we all keep. Yet we've all just said, none of us, just to clarify, none of us here bring Shabbat in at the time Rabbeinu Tam says, right? We all do differently. So that seems a bit bizarre. Just read very quickly the Shulchan Aruch, because there's two important points I want to take from the Shulchan Aruch. This is Shulchan Aruch, it's Reish Samach Aleph Bet. יש אומרים שצריך להוסיף מחול על הקודש בזמן תוספת זה מתחילה השקיעה שאין השמש נראית על הארץ על זמן בין השמשות והזמן הזה שהוא גימל מילין ורביעי רצה לעשות כולו תוספת לעשות ממנו מקצת עושה ובלבד שיוסף איזה זמן שיהיה ודאי יום מחול על הקודש ושזמן בין השמשות. Okay, we'll get to that in a bit. What that's effectively saying there in the Shulchan Aruch is two important things. The first thing is that we have a commandment to be Tosefet Shabbat, to add to Shabbat. We're going to get to this in a bit. The reasons why we have this commandment of Tosefet Shabbat are incredibly long and fascinating and deep and complex, and in some ways, some of them are quite dark, and there'll probably be a topic for a whole different share, which we're not going to get to now, but we have this commandment of Tosefet Shabbat to add to Shabbat, to add to sort of the holiness onto the mundane weekday. That's the first thing. But the second thing that the Shulchan Aruch goes on to say is he explains time in the same way that Rabbeinu Tam understood. That he talks about Mitzchila Hashkia. We have the original start of the Shkia, which is when the sun sets, and then we have 58 minutes of this kind of Shkia period, and then we have the final Shkia, the final sunset, 58 and a half minutes later, and that is when Shabbat comes in. So according to the Shulchan Aruch, we have this timing that goes with Rabbeinu Tam. And this seems very bizarre because, as we've said, we would normally go by the Shulchan Aruch unless the Rav Moshe Isserles, who we follow as Ashkenazim, or those of us who are Ashkenazim in the room would follow, unless he disagrees. And in this case, he doesn't come to disagree. At least here, he doesn't come to disagree. So if the Shulchan Aruch says like Rabbeinu Tam, why do we not follow that? Why is that not our custom to do? And the answer is, brought in the Mishnah Berurah commenting on that Shulchan Aruch, says, he brings the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, explains that it's the same as Rabbeinu Tam, but he then says at the end, however, there's many poskim who are cholek. There are many poskim who disagree with Rabbeinu Tam, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch. And they say that Shkia is exactly like you would have thought. When sunset, as soon as the sun goes below, that is Shkia. From that moment, Shabbat comes in. And that seems to be the opinion of the Mishnah Berurah. That seems to be the opinion that we all go by, the opinion that we follow, and that kind of guides us in what we do. And that's the reason that we all adhere to this opinion and not to the Rabbeinu Tam opinion. The interesting thing is that the Mishnah Berurah is not very strong in his language. And yet, basically, we don't know anyone who goes by Rabbeinu Tam time. Everyone seems to go by this opinion brought in the Mishnah Berurah. No one brings Shabbat in the Rabbeinu Tam time, really, as far as I know. I don't know anyone who does. Maybe you do. But as far as my understanding is, pretty much no one does anymore. And that begs the question, why is this the case? Why is that the case that everyone follows this Mishnah Berurah and no one really follows Rabbeinu Tam? And that brings us to a very interesting incident that happened in the 1950s or I think it was the 50s or the 60s in America. And what was happening was a really fascinating phenomenon because a lot of the Hasidim have the custom to follow Rabbeinu Tam in pretty much all things. So we would get a very interesting scenario where, if you could imagine yourself in the sort of New York at that time, you would be going to shul on a Friday evening, going for Kabbalat Shabbat. Shabbat would be in for you. You'd go to shul, you'd daven Mincha, Kabbalat Shabbat, Maariv. The whole thing would take, say, 45 minutes. And you'd come home, and on your way home, you'd see your Hasidish neighbor driving his car on the way to his shul, because for him, Shabbat hasn't come in yet. And that caused a lot of problems, because if you see that, what are you going to think? Well, it depends how nice a person you are. You're going to think, he's not that frum, that guy who wears a stripe, or whatever it is. It's not going to go well. It's going to cause some issues. And therefore, the big Gedolim, the big rabbis in America at the time got together, and they made an agreement that everyone would bring Shabbat in, not at Rabbeinu Tam time, that everyone would bring it in at the earlier time of Shkia, the way we understood it, of sunset the moment it happened. And that way there would be sort of a nice thing that everyone would be keeping Shabbat, and you wouldn't have this confusion of people, next to each other, and one's keeping Shabbat and one hasn't brought Shabbat in, and all of the confusion that I'm sure you can imagine that brings. So that's just the understanding that we bring. Hopefully, when we now have an understanding that we bring Shabbat and Shkia according to our original understanding, the moment it's sunset, that is when we are going to bring Shabbat in. So here is my next question for you. Last Shabbat, candle lighting was at 4:38. What time was Shkia? Last Shabbat, candle lighting was at 4:38. What time was Shkia? 15 minutes later. Why 15 minutes later? Very good. Okay, this is exactly what we want to talk about. We'll get to this. Okay, so we had candle lighting was at 4:38. But that was not the time of Shkia. Now, Stephen actually said 15 minutes. Has anyone heard of this idea that you have 18 minutes? You heard 18 minutes. Hands up if you heard the idea of 18 minutes, just to get the reference. Okay, very good. Now, if you're like me, and some of you may have noticed this, and I'm always running late, may or may not have noticed, but if you're like me and you're always running late, then you might have heard people sort of say in an encouraging tone, you're running late on a Friday, and you're worried about getting everything done, and someone says, it's okay, you've got 18 minutes, don't worry. You have an extra 18 minutes. As Stephen just said, that is not the case in this country, okay? We have 15 minutes. So I just want to explain where this notion comes from, first of all, of 18 minutes. We saw before that the Shulchan Aruch said there's a mitzvah to be Tosefet Shabbat. To add to Shabbat, we have a mitzvah. And when it discusses exactly how long that mitzvah should be, the answer it brings is 3/4 of a mil. don't want to go too long down this road, but if you think about ancient times where you didn't have a watch, you didn't have clocks on the wall, the easiest way to measure short amount of times was by talking about the amount of time it would take to do something. And that's the way sort of the Gemara operates. That's the way our halakhic system operates. It's the amount of time it takes to eat this, or the amount of time it takes to walk that. So a mil, what is 2,000 amas, which is roughly a kilometer, depending which opinion you abide by, roughly a kilometer. 3/4 of a mil, if we're being precise, is around 960 meters. Okay, so the way it works is it's the amount of time it would take to walk 960 meters. Now, the reason for that is there is one opinion we didn't bring earlier, and no one really agrees with this opinion, but it's brought by the Sefer Yera'im, and it says that Shkia is actually 3/4 of a mil before the sun sets. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but it's just a lone opinion that it's before the sun sets really is Shkia 3/4 of a mil. So what do? We have this commandment to add to Shabbos anyway. We say, you know what, we'll allow for that opinion. We'll bring it in 3/4 of a mil, whatever that time is we're going to talk about, before Shabbat comes in. Before Shkia, and that's the time that's going to be Tosefet Shabbat, and that way we're allowing for all the opinions, and we're adding to our Shabbat. Very nice, we've done everything right. The question is, how long is 3/4 of a mil? How long does it take to walk 960 meters? So according to the longest opinion, the longest amount of time it could be is 18 minutes. And that's why the vast majority of communities around the world, including Yerushalayim and most places in Israel and most places around the world, bring in Shabbat 18 minutes before Shkia. And that's where this idea of the 18 minutes, it's very famous, that a lot of us have heard of, that's where it comes from. Importantly, however, the English custom disagrees with this and says the amount of time of 3/4 to walk 3/4 mil, 960 meters, which I think is probably more accurate actually if you think about it, is 15 minutes. And that's why Shabbos comes in, we bring Shabbat in 15 minutes. We bring Shabbat in 15 minutes before Shkia. So that's sort of what we wanted to get to. We bring in 15 minutes, we've done Tosefet Shabbat, we've allowed for the opinion of the Sefer Yera'im, and that's why we do that. And it's interesting because, just to add a sort of caveat, does that mean we can freely do Melacha and break Shabbat for these 15 minutes and we don't have to worry about it? Absolutely not. We have to go with the community. Once the community says Shabbat comes in, for example, last week at 4:38, that is Shabbat, and we have to do our best to adhere to that time. However, in extreme circumstances, it's not actually Shabbat for us for another 15 minutes. So if we're in the middle of something really important, if we're, I don't know, say you're driving somewhere and there's lots of traffic and you've got stuck behind, you have that extra time to be able to get to somewhere that you can stop rather than just sort of pull over in the middle of the road, for example. But the important thing I wanted to emphasize in this country is it's 15 minutes, which I think is really important because a lot of people think it's 18, and that would, those 3 minutes would actually get you into Shabbos and you'd be breaking Shabbos, and that would be very problematic. So we started with this question: what is the similarity between breakfast and learn and Shabbat? And the answer, of course, is if the speaker of breakfast and learn, or if you going into Shabbat go any time over 15 minutes, you'll be strongly rebuked, and it will be very, very bad.
But everybody, sure, it's not. You say Miss Michelle Yom Shabbos.
Yes. The really, a lot of children will sort of time up that difference. So you say that.
And the other question, it's not Shabbos, Yom Tov. You haven't got an Eruv. Like on Yom Kippur, my wife would light the candles, and she couldn't carry a matzah to shul Yom Kippur. I could.
We won't go into all the answer now, but even those who say you can on Shabbos light candles with a condition in mind and then do Melacha until the time Shabbos comes in, which I'm not saying you can, I'm saying it's an opinion. On Yom Kippur, it's much more difficult. So if you lit the candles for Yom Kippur, you should really try and avoid doing Melacha after as well. So yeah, that's why.
Very much. There's one thing, one caveat. In Jerusalem and Petach Tikva, Shabbat comes in 40 minutes before Shkia. They have a special chumrah there. 40 minutes. Petach Tikva and Jerusalem.
One other question.
do the same as everyone else. But they would have back in the day gone by Rabbeinu Tam time, probably because they adhere to Rabbeinu Tam for a lot of things. But we've all made this agreement, so we don't have that confusing thing of seeing your neighbor driving down the road on Shabbat.
Great, thank you very much, Avi. Thank you, that's interesting. See you all next week, those on Zoom, and I will finish off now for those here in person by Zoom.